Welcome, beautiful souls, to Her True Stories, the channel where we dive deep into the raw, powerful stories of women who defied the odds, found their strength, and delivered a dose of unforgettable justice. Today, we're talking about a betrayal so profound that it struck at the heart of family, love, and legacy. Imagine being a grandmother, preparing for a dream vacation with your beloved family, only for them to abandon you at the airport. But what if that public humiliation, that searing pain, was the very spark that ignited a quiet storm? A storm fueled by a hidden key, secret documents, and an unwavering resolve, leading to a reckoning no one saw coming. Get ready, because this is a journey of triumph you won't want to miss. My name is Amanda Steinberg, and at 58 years old, I thought I had seen the worst that life could offer. I was wrong. The private jet terminal at LAX was quieter than usual that Tuesday morning in March. I sat in the plush leather chair, my hands folded neatly over my Hermes bag, watching the tarmac through floor-to-ceiling windows. The Gulfstream G650 sat waiting, its pristine white body gleaming in the California sun. 3 weeks in the Maldives, private villas, world-class dining, spa treatments, and quality time with my 2 daughters and their families. I had spared no expense. Marcus would have loved this. My late husband always said I worried too much about money when I should be spending it on experiences with the people we loved. 6 months after his funeral, I was finally ready to take his advice. I checked my Patek Philippe watch, 10:45 a.m. The flight was scheduled to depart at 11:30, and still no sign of Clara, Denise, or their families. My stomach churned with a familiar anxiety that I had hoped this trip would help me overcome. "Mrs. Steinberg?" The flight attendant approached with practiced grace. "We should begin boarding procedures soon. Are your guests running late?" "They'll be here," I said, though doubt was already creeping into my voice. I pulled out my phone and called Clara first. Straight to voicemail. Then Denise. Same thing. By 11:15, the pilot was growing restless. The other passengers, it was just supposed to be family, were nowhere to be seen. I called both daughters again. Nothing. My hands began to shake as I dialed my son-in-law, Robert, then David. Both calls went unanswered. "Mrs. Steinberg," the attendant said gently, "if your party doesn't arrive in the next few minutes, we'll need to delay departure or—" "They're coming," I insisted, but my voice cracked. The truth was settling in my chest like a stone. They weren't coming. They had planned this. All those excited phone calls about the itinerary, the grateful texts about how wonderful I was for organizing everything, it had all been an elaborate lie. At 11:45, I finally accepted what my heart had known for the past hour. They had abandoned me. My own daughters, my own flesh and blood, had left me sitting alone in an airport like some forgotten piece of luggage. The humiliation burned hotter than tears. I could feel the pitying stares of the terminal staff, the quiet whispers. Poor woman, stood up by her own family. I was gathering my purse, preparing for the walk of shame to my car, when I heard footsteps behind me. "Grandma Amanda?" I turned to see Lily, my 17-year-old granddaughter, Clara's youngest child. Her usually bright eyes were red-rimmed, and she clutched a thick envelope against her chest like it contained her deepest secrets. "Lily," my heart leaped. Maybe they hadn't abandoned me after all. Maybe there was an emergency, a misunderstanding. "Where is everyone? Where's your mother?" Lily's face crumpled. "Grandma, I'm so sorry. I couldn't let them do this without you knowing the truth." She pressed the envelope into my hands. It was heavier than I expected, and something small and metallic jingled inside. "What is this?" I asked, but Lily was already backing away. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. "I'm so sorry." And then she was gone, disappearing into the crowd of travelers, leaving me alone with nothing but an envelope and a broken heart. I didn't open the envelope until I was safely locked inside my Bentley in the airport parking garage. My hands trembled as I broke the seal, and the contents spilled across my lap, a small, ornate brass key and a stack of documents that would change everything I thought I knew about my family. The first page was a printed email from Clara to Denise, dated just 2 weeks ago. The old woman is finally planning something big enough to get her out of the country for 3 weeks. This is our chance to finalize everything with the lawyers. By the time she gets back from her precious vacation, we'll have full power of attorney, and she'll be in a memory care facility where she belongs. The doctor has already agreed to sign off on the dementia diagnosis. Robert found the perfect place in Palm Springs, expensive enough that she won't complain about the quality, isolated enough that she won't be able to cause trouble. My blood turned to ice. I read it again, certain I had misunderstood. But there it was in black and white. My daughters were planning to have me declared mentally incompetent and locked away in a facility. The next document was even worse, a forged psychiatric evaluation, supposedly documenting my progressive cognitive decline and inability to manage my financial affairs. Dr. Harrison's signature was at the bottom, though I hadn't seen him in over a year. Page after page revealed the depth of their betrayal. Bank statements show unauthorized transfers from my accounts. Property deeds are being quietly transferred into their names. Even my late husband's prized art collection was being sold off piece by piece. But it was the final document that broke me completely. A draft will, supposedly written in my hand, leave everything to Clara and Denise in equal shares, with a heartbreaking clause about my deep regret for being such a burden on my family in my final years. The key, according to a handwritten note in what looked like Marcus's writing, opened a safe deposit box at First National Bank downtown. Box 1247. There were more documents there, the note said. Insurance, in case this day ever came. I sat in that parking garage for 2 hours, reading and rereading every page until the words were burned into my memory. My daughters hadn't just abandoned me at the airport. They had been systematically destroying my life for months, possibly years. The vacation invitation hadn't been a gesture of love. It had been a trap to get me out of the country while they completed their betrayal. When I finally drove home to my empty mansion in Beverly Hills, I felt like a different person entirely. The grieving widow who had sat in that terminal was gone. In her place was someone harder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. The next morning, I drove to First National Bank with a clarity of purpose I hadn't felt since Marcus's death. The key fit perfectly into box 1247, and inside I found something that took my breath away, a detailed dossier that my late husband had compiled on our daughters. Marcus had known. Somehow, he had known this day would come. The folder contained years of surveillance, private investigator reports, financial records, even photographs. Clara's affair with her business partner, Denise's gambling addiction, and the $200,000 she had stolen from her children's college funds. Tax evasion schemes, insurance fraud, a web of lies and criminal behavior that went back more than a decade. But the most devastating discovery was a letter addressed to me in Marcus's handwriting. My dearest Amandla, if you are reading this, then our daughters have shown their true colors at last. I have known for years what they are capable of, but I hoped against hope that they would prove me wrong. I wanted to tell you, but you love them so completely, so unconditionally, that I couldn't bear to break your heart while I was still alive to comfort you. Everything in this box is legally obtained evidence of their crimes. Use it wisely. They have chosen greed over love, and now they must face the consequences. But remember, my darling, revenge is not about destruction. It's about justice. And sometimes, the quietest justice is the most profound. I have taken certain precautions. Jonathan Carver at Carver & Associates has been briefed and is waiting for your call. The accounts they don't know about are safely protected. You have more power than they realize, and more allies than they could imagine. Be strong. Be smart. And when this is over, live the life we always dreamed of. Peaceful, quiet, and free. All my love, Marcus. Enclosed with the letter was a business card for Jonathan Carver, along with account numbers for offshore holdings I had never known existed. Marcus had been protecting me even from beyond the grave. I called Mr. Carver from the bank's parking lot. Mrs. Steinberg. His voice was warm but professional. I've been waiting for this call. I'm very sorry for your loss, and for what you must be going through. Shall we meet today? 2 hours later, I sat in his downtown office as he laid out the full scope of what my husband had prepared. Hidden accounts worth over $40 million. A network of trusted advisors and investigators. Legal documents that would allow me to reclaim every penny my daughters had stolen, plus interest and penalties. Marcus was very specific in his instructions, Mr. Carver explained. He wanted you to have options. You can pursue criminal charges, civil recovery, or... He paused, studying my face. There are more subtle approaches available. What kind of subtle approaches? He smiled, and I saw a gleam in his eye that reminded me of Marcus when he was planning one of his brilliant business moves. The kind that let people destroy themselves while you watch from a safe distance. The kind that leave no fingerprints but maximum impact. Tell me more. Mr. Carver's plan was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than confronting my daughters directly or involving law enforcement immediately, we would let the natural consequences of their own greed and stupidity play out while giving them a gentle push in the right direction. The beauty of people like your daughters, he explained, is that they always overextend themselves. They're spending money they don't actually have, based on expectations of money they haven't actually inherited. All we have to do is adjust those expectations. Phase 1 began with their credit. Both Clara and Denise had been using their anticipated inheritance as collateral for various loans and investments. Through Mr. Carver's contacts at several banks, subtle questions began to be raised about the stability of their financial situations. Credit lines were quietly reduced. Loan applications were delayed pending additional documentation. Meanwhile, I activated the fraud alerts on all the accounts they had been draining. Every unauthorized transaction would now trigger immediate freezes and investigations. I also hired a forensic accountant to document every penny they had stolen, building an ironclad case for future legal proceedings. Within a week, Clara called me for the first time since the airport incident. Mom, her voice was strained. I've been trying to reach you. Are you okay? We heard the Maldives trip got canceled. I let the silence stretch before responding. Yes, it was canceled. Something about no one showing up. Oh, that. She laughed awkwardly. There was a family emergency with David's mother. I tried to call you, but couldn't get through. We felt terrible about missing it. Every word was a lie, delivered with a kind of casual dishonesty that made my stomach turn. How long had she been lying to me like this? I see, I said calmly. How is David's mother now? A pause. Clara hadn't expected me to ask follow-up questions.
She's better.
Much better. Listen, Mom, I was actually calling because we're having some temporary cash flow issues with the business. Just a timing thing, you understand. I was wondering if you might be able to help us out with a short-term loan. How much? Well, we were thinking maybe 100,000? Just until the Henderson deal closes next month. I knew from the documents in Lily's envelope that there was no Henderson deal. Clara and her husband were hemorrhaging money on bad investments and expensive vacations they couldn't afford. Let me think about it, I said. I'll get back to you. I never called back. Similar conversations followed with Denise, who needed money for emergency home repairs that I knew from Marcus's surveillance files were actually payments to her bookie. When I failed to respond to either daughter's increasingly desperate requests for financial help, they began to panic. But that was only the beginning. Mr. Carver had warned me that phase 2 would be the most psychologically difficult for me to watch. We're going to let them turn on each other, he had explained. People under financial pressure rarely maintain their loyalties. He was right, and it was harder to watch than I had expected. The pressure began with strategic leaks of information. Through his network of contacts, Mr. Carver ensured that certain details about my daughter's financial situations became known in their respective social circles. Clara's country club friends learned about the liens on her house. Denise's neighbors found out about the repo men who had been looking for her Mercedes. More devastatingly, each daughter began to receive anonymous tips about the other's behavior. Clara learned about Denise's gambling debts. Denise discovered Clara's affair. Both began to suspect that the other was secretly siphoning more money from my accounts. I watched it all unfold through reports from the private investigators Mr. Carver had retained. Clara and Denise, who had been united in their plan to betray me, were now at each other's throats. The breaking point came when Clara accused Denise of stealing an extra $50,000 from one of my accounts, an accusation that happened to be true, though Clara had no way of knowing it. Denise retaliated by threatening to expose Clara's affair to her husband Robert. Their phone conversations, which I was legally permitted to monitor due to the ongoing fraud investigation, became increasingly vicious. They called each other names I had never heard them use. They threatened legal action. They demanded accountings of every penny the other had taken from me. It was during one of these conversations that I realized how completely they had dehumanized me in their minds. I wasn't their mother anymore. I was just a source of money they were fighting over like vultures over carrion. That realization hardened my heart in ways I hadn't expected. Throughout this chaos, Lily had been texting me regularly, updating me on her family's deteriorating situation and expressing her growing horror at what she was witnessing. Grandma, Mom, and Aunt Denise had a screaming fight in our driveway yesterday. The neighbors all came out to watch. Mom threw Dad's golf clubs at Aunt Denise's car. Dad's been sleeping in his office for a week. I heard him on the phone with a lawyer about divorce. Mom keeps asking me weird questions about your mental state. She wants me to write a statement saying you've been acting strangely. I told her no. I arranged to meet Lily at a small cafe in Westwood, far from anywhere her parents might see us. She looked exhausted and years older than her 17 years. Grandma, I'm so sorry I had to be the one to tell you about their plans, she said, tears streaming down her face. I found those documents when I was looking for my birth certificate in Mom's office. I couldn't believe what I was reading. You did the right thing, sweetheart. But now everything is falling apart. Mom and Dad are getting divorced. Mom lost her job because she kept missing meetings to meet with lawyers. Dad's business is failing because Mom was stealing from the company accounts. She looked up at me with desperate eyes. Is this because of what I told you? I reached across the table and took her hands. This is because of choices your parents made long before you found those documents. You didn't cause any of this, Lily. You just refused to be complicit in it. What's going to happen to them? I have been asking myself the same question. The original plan had been to let them destroy themselves through their own greed and paranoia, then quietly reclaim my stolen money and disappear from their lives forever. But watching the collateral damage, Lily's pain, the younger grandchildren's confusion, the public humiliation that was affecting people beyond just Clara and Denise, was taking a toll on me. I don't know yet, I told her honestly. But I promise you, whatever happens, you'll be taken care of. You and your brothers and your cousins. This isn't your fault, and you won't be punished for your parents' choices. That conversation planted a seed of doubt about how far I was willing to let this spiral go. Revenge felt righteous when it was just about me, but involving innocent children, even indirectly, was something I needed to think about more carefully. The confrontation I had been both dreading and anticipating finally came on a Thursday afternoon in July. I was in my garden, tending to the roses Marcus had planted years ago, when I heard the front gate buzzer. The security camera showed both daughters standing on my doorstep, looking haggard and desperate. I almost didn't let them in. Part of me wanted to let them stand there, pressing the buzzer until they gave up and drove away. But I was curious to see what they would say, how they would try to justify months of betrayal and theft. They looked terrible. Clara had lost at least 20 pounds, and her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Denise's designer clothes were wrinkled, and her makeup couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her eyes. "Mom," Clara began as soon as I opened the door. "We need to talk." "About what?" I kept my voice neutral, watching their faces. "About the money you've been blocking," Denise said bluntly. "Our accounts have been frozen. Our credit cards are maxed out. We can't even pay our mortgages." "I haven't blocked any money," I said, which was technically true. I had simply reported fraudulent activity on my accounts, and the banks had responded according to their standard procedures. "Don't lie to us." Clara's composure cracked. "We know you found out about the vacation. We know you're punishing us." "Found out about what vacation?" They exchanged glances, realizing they had just admitted to something I hadn't directly accused them of. "Mom, please." Denise tried a different approach. "I know we made mistakes. We should have communicated better about our financial needs. But we're family. Surely we can work this out." "Mistakes?" I stepped back to study both of them. "Is that what you call forging my signature on loan documents? Is that what you call bribing a doctor to declare me mentally incompetent? Is that what you call stealing from your own children's college funds?" The color drained from both their faces. They hadn't expected me to know the full extent of their betrayal.
Who told you about that?
Clara whispered. "Does it matter?" I walked past them into the living room, forcing them to follow. "The question is, what exactly do you want from me now?" "We want you to call off whatever you're doing," Denise said, some of her old arrogance returning. "Stop the investigation. Unfreeze the accounts. Let us access the trust funds Dad left us. And in return, we'll pay back what we borrowed," Clara offered weakly. "Borrowed?" I laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound. "You mean stole. And with what money? You're both bankrupt." The truth hung in the air between us, like poison gas. We all knew they had no way to repay what they had taken. We all knew this wasn't a negotiation. It was a surrender. "What do you want?" Denise asked finally. "What will it take for you to forgive us and move past this?" I studied their faces for a long moment. These two women I had carried in my body, nursed as babies, loved unconditionally for decades. I saw no genuine remorse there, only fear of consequences. They weren't sorry for betraying me, they were sorry for getting caught. "I want you to leave," I said quietly. "Mom," Clara started. "I want you to leave my house, and I want you to stay away. From me, from my money, from my life. You made your choice when you decided to abandon me at that airport. You made your choice when you forged my signature and tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. Now live with the consequences." "You can't cut us off forever," Denise said desperately. "We're your daughters." "No," I replied, walking to the front door and opening it. "My daughters would never have done what you did. I don't know who you are, but you're not my family anymore." They left, but not quietly. Clara screamed threats about legal action. Denise promised to tell everyone what a vindictive old witch I was. I watched their cars disappear down my driveway and felt nothing but relief. Over the following months, I worked with Mr. Carver to systematically reclaim everything my daughters had stolen and destroy their ability to continue their fraudulent activities. The process was methodical and thorough. First, we activated the criminal fraud charges. The evidence Marcus had gathered, combined with the forensic accounting I had commissioned, painted a clear picture of years of systematic theft and fraud. Both daughters were arrested on federal charges of elder abuse, fraud, and forgery. The arrests were handled quietly, with no media attention, but the legal consequences were severe. Both Clara and Denise faced potential prison time and were required to make full restitution for their thefts. Since they had no money to pay restitution, their remaining assets, houses, cars, jewelry, everything of value, were seized and sold at auction. The civil case was even more devastating. Beyond the stolen money, I was awarded punitive damages and attorney's fees that multiplied their debt to me several times over. They would be paying me for the rest of their lives, assuming they ever earned enough money to make meaningful payments. But the most effective punishment was the simplest. I completely cut off their access to my fortune. The trust funds Marcus had established for them were dissolved due to their criminal behavior. Their names were removed from my will entirely. Every door that had been opened to them, because of their connection to my wealth, was permanently closed. Within a year, both of my daughters went from living in luxury to struggling to afford basic necessities. Clara's husband Robert divorced her and got full custody of their children, including Lily, who chose to live with her father. Denise's husband David filed for bankruptcy and moved back in with his elderly parents. I watched it all happen with a detachment that would have surprised my younger self. The woman who had once worried constantly about her daughter's happiness felt nothing but satisfaction as their lives crumbled under the weight of their own choices. The letters started arriving about 18 months after the arrests. First from Clara, then from Denise, begging for forgiveness, for mercy, for just enough money to get back on their feet. Mom, I know I made terrible mistakes, but I'm your daughter. I'm living in a studio apartment and working as a cashier at a grocery store. I can barely afford food. Please, I'm begging you, help me. I'll do anything to make this right. I was wrong about everything. I was greedy and stupid, and I hurt you terribly. But I've learned my lesson. I go to therapy now. I've joined a program for gambling addiction. I'm trying to be a better person. Can't you find it in your heart to give me another chance? The letters came weekly, sometimes daily. They were desperate, pathetic things that might have moved me if I had known that desperation was the only thing that had inspired them. My daughters weren't sorry for betraying me. They were sorry for facing consequences. I never responded to a single letter. Eventually, they tried showing up at my house again, but my security team had instructions to escort them off the property immediately. They tried reaching out through mutual friends and distant relatives, but I had made it clear to everyone in my social circle that any contact with my daughters would result in the immediate end of those relationships. The final attempt came from Lily, who is now in college at Stanford on a scholarship I had quietly arranged through Mr. Carver. "Grandma," she said when I met her for lunch near campus, "I know what they did was unforgivable, but they're still my mom and aunt. She's not doing well. She's drinking heavily, and she's talked about hurting herself." I studied my granddaughter's face, seeing the genuine pain there. Lily loved her mother despite everything, and it was killing her to watch Clara's self-destruction. "What would you like me to do about that?" I asked gently. Maybe just enough money for them to get mental health treatment? Or to move somewhere cheaper where they could start over. "Lily," I said, taking her hands across the table, "your mother and aunt made choices that went far beyond just stealing money from me. They tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. They planned to lock me away in a facility where I would have spent my final years as a prisoner. They didn't just steal my money, they tried to steal my entire life." "I know, but..." "There are no buts, sweetheart. They crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. They chose money over love, greed over family. Now, they have to live with those choices." Lily cried, and it broke my heart to see her pain. But I had learned something important over the past 2 years. Sometimes love means letting people face the full consequences of their actions, even when it hurts everyone involved. What about forgiveness? She asked through her tears. Don't you believe in second chances? I believe in accountability, I replied. And I believe that some actions have permanent consequences. Your mother and aunt didn't make mistakes, Lily. They made calculated decisions to betray and destroy me. Forgiveness doesn't mean I have to subject myself to more abuse. That was the last time anyone asked me to help my daughters. 3 years after that terrible day at the airport, I moved to a small coastal town in Northern California. The house I bought was nothing like the Beverly Hills mansion. It was a modest craftsman cottage with a view of the ocean and a garden where I could grow my own vegetables. I kept my move secret from everyone except Lily and Mr. Carver. As far as the rest of the world knew, I was traveling extensively, living the nomadic lifestyle of a wealthy widow. In reality, I was living more simply than I had in decades. My days followed a peaceful routine. I woke with the sunrise and walked along the beach with my rescue dog, a golden retriever mix I had named Marcus in honor of my late husband. I tended my garden, read books I had never had time for during my busy social life, and cooked simple meals in my small kitchen. The town was full of other people who had chosen simplicity over complexity, retired teachers, artists, writers, and others who valued peace over prestige. I made friends slowly and carefully, people who knew me as Amanda, the quiet widow who volunteered at the animal shelter and made excellent banana bread. I never told them about my former life, my wealth, or my daughters. That was a different person from a different time. Lily visited every few months, and our relationship deepened in ways it never could have when she was caught between loyalty to her mother and affection for me. She was studying to become a social worker, specializing in elder abuse cases. I want to help people like you, Grandma, she had told me. People who've been betrayed by their own families. I was proud of her strength, her integrity, her refusal to let her parents' failures define her own path. Through Mr. Carver, I had established a trust fund that would pay for her education and help her establish herself in her career, but she didn't know the source of the assistance. She believed it was need-based financial aid. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered what had happened to Clara and Denise. Mr. Carver provided occasional updates without me asking. Clara had moved to a small town in Arizona and was working at a diner. Denise was living with a sister in Ohio and cleaning houses for a living. Both were still paying court-ordered restitution from their meager earnings, amounts so small they would need several lifetimes to repay what they had stolen. I felt no satisfaction in their suffering, but I felt no guilt either. They had chosen their path when they decided to abandon me at that airport. Everything that followed was simply the natural consequence of that choice. The peace I felt in my new life was profound in ways I hadn't expected. For decades, I had carried the burden of worrying about my daughters, making excuses for their behavior, enabling their irresponsibility with my wealth and unconditional love. Now that burden was gone. I was free. 5 years have passed since I discovered my daughter's betrayal, and I can honestly say they're the most peaceful years I have ever known. I wake up each morning grateful for the simple pleasures of my quiet life. The sound of waves outside my window, the smell of coffee brewing, the sight of my garden in bloom. I think often about Marcus's letter, about his wisdom regarding justice versus revenge. He was right, as he so often was. The quietest justice is indeed the most profound. I didn't need to destroy my daughters' lives. I simply stepped back and allowed them to destroy themselves through their own greed and poor choices. The money they stole, every penny of it, has been repaid through the sale of their assets and their ongoing restitution payments. But more than that, they lost access to the comfortable, privileged life they had taken for granted. They learned what it meant to work for minimum wage, to worry about paying rent, to face the daily struggles that most people accept as normal parts of life. I don't know if they learned anything from their experience. I hope they did, for their own sake, but their education was never my responsibility. My only responsibility was to protect myself from further abuse and to live the remainder of my life on my own terms. The inheritance they had counted on, the money they had tried to steal through fraud and manipulation, now goes to causes I believe in, scholarships for students like Lily who overcome family dysfunction to build better lives, support services for elderly people who have been victimized by financial abuse, and animal rescue organizations in my adopted coastal community. They will never see another penny of Marcus's wealth or mine. That door is permanently closed. But perhaps the most profound justice is simply this: I am happy. Deeply, quietly, completely happy in a way I never was during all those years of worry and anxiety about my daughter's behavior. I sleep well at night. I wake up looking forward to each day. I have genuine friendships based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. My daughters, according to Mr. Carver's occasional reports, remain bitter and angry, blaming everyone but themselves for their circumstances. They tell anyone who will listen that their mother is a vindictive old woman who abandoned her own children out of spite. Let them talk. The people who matter know the truth. I am not vindictive. I am not spiteful. I am simply a woman who finally learned to value her own peace and dignity above the comfort of others. I am a woman who discovered that sometimes the greatest act of love, both for yourself and for others, is walking away and letting natural consequences play out without interference. Sometimes, late at night when I'm sitting on my porch watching the stars reflect on the ocean, I think about that terrible day at the airport. I remember the humiliation, the heartbreak, the crushing realization that my own daughters had used my love against me. But I also remember Lily's brave choice to give me that envelope. I remember Marcus's foresight in protecting me even after his death. I remember my own strength in choosing justice over revenge, peace over drama, dignity over destruction. The woman who sat crying in that airport terminal seems like a stranger to me now. She was someone who defined herself through her relationships with others, who measured her worth by how much she could give, how much she was needed. She was generous to a fault, loving to a fault, trusting to a fault. I am not that woman anymore. I am someone who chooses carefully who deserves my trust, my generosity, my love. I am someone who understands that peace is worth more than any relationship that requires me to compromise my dignity or safety. I am someone who learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away and live well.
This is my story.
This is my quiet victory.
And this is my peace.
And that, my friends, is the power of a woman who was abandoned but found her strength, her dignity, and her ultimate peace in the most unexpected way. A manless journey reminds us that sometimes the greatest victory isn't in dramatic confrontations or grand gestures of revenge. It's in the quiet choice to value yourself enough to walk away from toxicity and build a life of genuine peace and contentment. If a manless story resonated with you, if you believe in the power of choosing your own happiness over others' expectations, then hit that subscribe button, join the Her True Stories family, and let's continue to share these incredible tales of quiet strength and profound courage together. Until next time, stay strong, stay true to yourself, and remember, your peace is worth protecting.